Goedemiddag. Welkom op deze mooie en altijd zonnige dag in het mooie Maastricht. Mijn naam is Tom van Veen, ik ben acting pro-rector van deze universiteit en zit deze ceremonie voor. That's all I would say in Dutch. Now we shift to English. Hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Henriëtte Bogaard will defend the academic thesis Students and Job Seekers under Environmental Stressors, Insights from a Pandemic and Air Quality Variations. May I invite you, Henriëtte, to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis in 15 minutes.
So thank you. Dear Pro-Rector, members of the Defense Committee, dear family, friends and colleagues. Welcome to the defense of my PhD thesis entitled Students and Job Seekers under Environmental Stressors, Insights from a Pandemic and Air Quality Variations. In the next few minutes, I would like to tell you which questions I studied, how I studied these questions, and also which answers I found. So we spend a substantial part of our lives on labor market activities. Already when we're very young, we go to school to learn the basic skills, like reading and writing. And then later on, we prepare ourselves to enter the job market to find a good job. And upon graduation, we start searching for a job and then work a large part of our lives. Maybe we switch jobs or also become unemployed. And these labor market activities are very important for our personal development, our life satisfaction, but also our financial stability. And that's why we would really like to build such an environment that everyone can thrive. However, it might be that there are factors that could actually limit opportunities, hinder learning, reduce the probability of finding a good job. So imagine, for example, students that are unable to perform well. This might also affect their careers. Or job seekers, workers who are not satisfied with their job. They're less productive. So this also directly impacts our economy or economic growth. And that's why it's so important to understand the factors that might actually impact our labor market performance or labor market activities. And such factors that I study in my thesis are environmental stressors. And these could be roughly divided into two categories. The first one being disruptive events. So here, think about the pandemic, for example. So this really disrupted our lives with lockdowns, working from home, studying from home, but also think about natural disasters. It could be floods, wildfires. And the second category are environmental conditions. So these are things that are basically always around us, even though we might not be aware. Temperature, but also air quality. And in my thesis, I focus on two of these environmental stressors. So, in chapter 2, I study how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted students at university. Chapters 3 and 4 study how air quality impacts job seekers, unemployed job seekers. So let me start with chapter 2. In which I study the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the study progress, the study performance of university students. Previous literature already shows that there is learning deficits in primary and secondary education. But there's not a lot of literature on higher education. Whereas they were also affected by the pandemic. So think about them having to switch from just regular education to online education. And on top of this, they also faced quite a bit of stress. Financial stress, because they lost their side jobs, restaurants closed. They were worried about their own health of their family members. And social distancing was not easy for students, especially in student housing. And on top of this, they are very close to entering the labor market, which means that any knowledge that they basically did not gain during this pandemic, any skills that they did not gain, they have a hard time catching up before actually entering this labor market, which could directly impact their careers, but also the labor market itself, because maybe they're less productive because of this. And to study this question, how the pandemic affected student progress, I use unique data on medical students in the Netherlands. So these medical students in the Netherlands take a so-called progress test, and that measures their knowledge accumulation over time. So they take this test 4 times a year, which consists of 200 multiple choice questions. And they not only take this 4 times a year, they really take this over the entire duration of their study program, from year 1 up to year 6. And the unique feature here is that this test, the same test, is taken by all students, regardless of what phase they are in their study program. So students in the first year get exactly the same test as the students in 3rd year or 6th year. And this therefore allows us to really monitor their knowledge growth. And this graph kind of gives you an illustration of what this looks like. So on the horizontal axis, you see the different tests they take. Test 1 is the first test in their first year of the bachelor program. Test 16 is the last test of their 4th year. On the vertical axis, you see the average test scores in percentages. And what you can notice here is that over time, so over all these different tests, actually their test scores increase, which suggests that their knowledge increases. And what I do, I use this unique feature that we can really see the knowledge accumulation to study the impact of the pandemic. For this, I compare the test scores of the cohorts who already took these tests before the pandemic. So they are older cohorts. Think about cohorts starting already in 2011 or 2015. And I compare them to the cohorts who were affected by the pandemic early on in the studies, in the 1st and 2nd year. So let me illustrate, let me a bit simplify this graph. Again, we see this increasing test scores over time. And now, if there wasn't a pandemic, we would expect also these younger cohorts to just basically follow the same line. However, now there was a pandemic. This changed everything for them. So maybe we do not see a difference, but what could happen is that we actually start seeing a difference here. And I'm interested in whether we see this difference and what this difference is. And what do I find? I find that students obtained lower test scores during the pandemic by approximately 9.5%. And this is driven by them answering fewer questions, approximately 9%. So this is quite substantial. And this suggests a slowdown in their knowledge accumulation. And remember what I said, they're very close to entering the labor market. So any slowdown in their knowledge accumulation could actually have important implications for their careers, but also the labor market. Let me now continue to the second part of my thesis, which is about how air quality affects job seekers. Chapter 3 looks into how air quality affects job search behavior, and Chapter 4 looks in how improvements in air quality affects job search outcomes. And previous literature already shows that poor air quality is very bad for health. It increases the probability of cardiovascular respiratory diseases. Also think about headaches and being more tired. And it negatively affects our productivity. So more polluted days, we actually take more breaks. And it affects our cognition, so we make more mistakes. And especially the last two things are important for job seekers. They need to be productive, they need to send out applications, otherwise they won't find a job. Also, they need to make the right decisions. And studying how air quality affects the job search behavior, I'm looking into a key concept in labor economics, the reservation wage. So this reservation wage is the lowest wage at which a job seeker is willing to accept a job offer and stop searching for better offers. So now imagine I offer you a job for €5 an hour. Not a lot of you would be interested. But if I increase this to 20 to 50 euros an hour, more people start to think about this. So everyone has this kind of threshold of this lowest wage in mind. And this is what I use, this key concept that's also predictive of your wage and of the duration of your unemployment. And for this I use data on unemployed in Germany. They were drawn from a pool randomly called, "Do you want to participate in this interview about your job search behavior?" And we know exactly when they were interviewed. So now imagine, we have this call center worker. He or she has to call different people from a list. randomly picks a person, then calls on a certain day. What you can imagine is that air quality varies over time. Every day is different. Also during the day, maybe during traffic jams, it is actually more polluted than during a night where there's a lot of wind. Also in different areas. So think about rural areas versus industrial areas. And I use this variation to see how their air quality that they're exposed to impacts the answers given during this interview, impacts their reservation wage that they report. And what do I find? I find that exposure to higher levels of air pollution reduces the reservation wage. This effect is approximately as large as the effect of financial assets, your wealth, on reservation wages, but is 3 times as large as the impact of an additional month of unemployment, where you have to know that people reduce their reservation wage over time because they realize that actually their wage criteria might be too high. So this is quite a big effect. Now you might be wondering, but what about their wages and the duration of unemployment? And this is what I study in my 4th chapter, where I look at how improvements in air quality due to the implementation of low emission zones impact these job search outcomes. So imagine we have 2 cities, City A and City B. The people there are on average the same in terms of their job search outcomes, their wages, their unemployment duration. But now, in City A, a low emission zone is implemented. That restricts the access of more polluting cars to the city center and thereby improves the local air quality. So the differences we now find, controlling for a lot of things of course, between City A and B on their wages and unemployment duration can be attributed to this introduction of low emission zones. And I find that actually this introduction of low emission zones reduced unemployment, but also reduced wages. So what this suggests, as I said, low emission zones improve the air quality, is that this improved air quality reduces wages, but also actually shortens the duration of unemployment. Let me conclude these 2 chapters. So in these 2 chapters, I see that air quality exposure affects job seekers' search behavior. It disrupts their search behavior because now suddenly they are willing to accept lower wages. But it also affects their job search outcomes. And that's why I would say that it's very important to also consider the impact on these vulnerable groups, like the unemployed, when evaluating these costs of air quality. We should not only restrict it to health, but there are other consequences, labor market consequences, that should also be taken into account to have the full picture of what is actually going on. What are the costs? What are the benefits of air quality? So to summarize, in Chapter 2, I show that the COVID-19 pandemic had a negative impact on student study performance. I saw a slowdown in their knowledge accumulation. Chapter 3 shows that exposure to poor air quality, to air pollution, reduces reservation wages, so people are willing to accept lower wages. And Chapter 4 shows a negative impact of improved air quality due to this implementation of low emission zones on unemployment duration as well as wages. Taken together, my thesis shows that environmental stresses can actually impact individual performance in labor market activities and in education. And it basically shows that these environmental stresses could hinder learning and also the job search progress or process. So it could potentially actually have important implications for everyone's careers, but also for the labor market and the economy. Thank you for your attention. I now give the word back to the Pro-Rector.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Schils, Professor of the Economics of Education at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, Thank you for giving me the opportunity to read your dissertation very thoroughly. It is a well-written dissertation, and I think it's on a very novel topic. The topic of COVID is not as novel anymore as we hope, but I think you give some insights into aspects of life that are understudied in general. It's also quite impressive how you used new data sets, but also data sets that are like difficult to treat for the analyses. And I know you struggled a lot with that, but you were able to reach some nice and rich conclusions. And I think it's a congratulations on that. But of course, I also want to pick your brains on some aspects of your thesis. And it might not surprise you, I'm interested in chapter 2. And in chapter 2, you looked into the consequences of COVID-19, and you explained it really well in your presentation. And you used a sample of medical students. Well, maybe you first can tell us a little bit about why you used medical students. But my question is, do you expect that the results of your thesis also apply to other disciplines, so students in economics, for example, or students in cultural sciences? We have many different disciplines in university, and you yourself say in chapter 5 that students sort into certain study tracks, and results might not be generalizable. But what kind of differences would there be, could there be? And second to that, you study students in a university institution, but we also have students in higher vocational education, HBO. Would you expect that these results, even if you would look into the medical domain, would be similar for HBO students or not? Looking forward to your answers.
Highly esteemed opponent, first of all, thank you for your kind words and also for your interesting questions. And I would like to start with your very first question. So why did I actually focus on medical students? I would say I could be very short on the first thing, data availability. So in general, what is, well, the problem with higher education? It's very hard to find good data that actually shows the progress of students over time. So quite often you then have to rely on single courses, single GPAs, that cannot really be compared. And this was very interesting data because you can really see, okay, what knowledge do they learn over time? And I think that's also very important in the COVID context, because it's not maybe for one course that they do something or, well, are hindered, but it's really their whole knowledge accumulation. So that's why I chose the medical students, because of this interesting data. But also with this, there might be some limitations like the external validity that you're pointing towards. So I totally agree, as I also mentioned in my discussion, that it might not be very well generalizable to other student populations. And why might this be the case? It is in general known that maybe medical students, they first have to do a lot of tests before they're actually admitted to the program. So they might also be different to other students who maybe did not make it to the medical study and therefore go to other studies. That's one thing. Also, of course, COVID was a medical thing that happened. That also might be different for these students who might have been super interested in this topic and learned more, for example, or, well, they learned other skills. So this is indeed a concern here. However, I would also say that my results actually match quite well with the existing literature on this higher education. So overall, actually, everyone finds a negative impact. The size is very hard, difficult to compare because of all these differences, different methods, different countries. But overall, I basically find the same type of negative impacts. So with this whole literature together, I would say it really adds to the robustness of the story that there was this negative impact. So that's also what motivates me, even though maybe it's not external value, to still focus on this small group, because every piece of information adds to the whole story, especially if for these different populations, we basically find the same answer in the end, because most literature focuses on economic students. And also there you can ask, are these representative for the general population. So I think it's good that we have studies on different types of students here as well. Your last question regarding university versus HBO. I think this is also an interesting question. So at university, it is also a lot more theoretical. So I focus on mainly bachelor students. Still, in the bachelor, it is quite theoretical. HBO, on the other hand, there are a lot of practicals, or internships even. So with these internships, I think a lot changed for them. Just working in a hospital, the whole thing's changed there. So whether it's generalizable to also, students in the health sector of the HBO, I'm not sure, because they have a different interruption of their study program. I would say they are affected, for sure, but what will be the outcome, that's an interesting thing to still look at.
Yeah, so thank you for your answer. So it might be that the gap for knowledge accumulation is smaller than the gap for skills accumulation, which is maybe more important for the higher vocational students, because they build their skills in the internships, like you said. So could be.
Yeah, so that could very well be. Maybe I'm still able to test this because I also have students in their master in this medical program. Thus far, I did not focus on them because these internships were all disrupted. They sometimes started later, that they had actually some kind of study delay. So therefore, I didn't look at them yet, but maybe there's some opportunity to also look at how internship, these skills were affected.
Okay, thank you. Give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Stefan, Professor of Economics and Head of Research Unit Active Labour Market Policies and Integration at the University for Employment Research in Nuremberg, Germany.
So, dear candidate, dear Henriëtte, I really enjoyed reading your thesis and today also hearing your talk, your presentation. Now for my questions. Two of your studies find that air pollution has a statistically significant effect on labor market outcomes. First, can you give us a short overview of the potential mechanisms behind that? And second, you mentioned this shortly for the first pollution study, but not for the second. Can you tell us a little bit more about the economic significance of these effects? So from a labor market perspective, should we care about these effects?
Highly esteemed opponent, so thanks for your kind words and your interesting questions. I'm very happy to give a bit of an overview of why I might find these effects, what's playing in the background. So let's first start, because it basically is very much related with why we think that the job search process, job search behavior is affected. What basically the literature on air quality shows is that it affects productivity of the individuals. So what might be happening here is that individuals are less productive, which would mean, in terms of job seekers, that they might send out less applications. With less applications, of course, it's harder to find a job. So this could then directly also impact their duration of unemployment, and via this longer duration, it could affect their reservation wage. The other mechanism, so we actually also test this mechanism. This is actually only mainly correlation, and we also find that the number of applications goes down quite sharply. So this could indeed then also be a potential mechanism. The other two mechanisms that we test are more behavioral preferences. So I look at risk aversion, but also patience. And the literature on air quality basically shows that both things like risk tolerance, but also patience, are affected. So air pollution causes people to be more risk averse and more impatient. So what does this mean for their job search behavior? It's if you're very risk averse, you don't like being unemployed in general. You want to have this stability of having a job, having an income. Also, when you're very impatient, you basically rather just have this job now, do not really want to spend a lot of time and just want to accept one of the first jobs that's coming. With this, because you really want to have this job, you're lowering your wage criteria, so your reservation wage. And this is also a mechanism that we actually test and observe. So we do see that patience is decreased in our sample by air pollution, but also that people become more risk averse. So they could be likely mechanisms for our findings that the reservation wage decreases. And yeah, as I think I also mentioned in my presentation, so this decrease in reservation wage could then also mean lower wages because people want to accept this. But then going on to the economic significance in my chapter 4. So what is really this impact of air quality on the wages, on the unemployment duration? So on the wages, I find that these wages decrease by approximately 1.8%. This might not sound like a lot, but this is the hourly, monthly, or I should say this correctly, the monthly wage. If you accumulate this to the full year, over your whole year income, 1.8%, is again quite substantial, in my opinion. Also, the duration of unemployment decreases by about 7 days, so a week, and this is a decrease of 4.4%. So maybe they are not very large changes, but also think about it is just air quality that's around. People are not aware. So for something like this, I think it's still quite shocking that it really impacts us this way. We will somewhat notice it in the end.
Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Professor Goldstein, Professor of Human Capital and Social Economics at Maastricht University.
Thank you. First of all, dear candidate, dear Henriëtte, congratulations also from my side. I think it's a wonderful thesis and contains three very well written chapters. Congratulations on that. I'm here, of course, to ask a question, and my questions are on chapter 2. And so first, I wonder why you actually choose this progress test, so this voortgangstoets. You show with this test that there is a slowdown in knowledge accumulation, but I think actually this test attenuates your results because it's an accumulation of a lot of knowledge that both the treatment and control group acquired in earlier periods. And so I wonder why you don't take a regular test to show your results, to study your results. So that's question 1. And then my second question is actually on page 24, figure 2.3. Yeah. My question there is on the commonality of the trends. So you only have 3 periods before COVID. And that is logical because the bachelor phase consists only of three years. But I wonder, should we not be worried about that you can only test common trends for such a short period? So with regular tests, I think you could have had more test moments, and so you could have tested this commonality in a better way. But then, looking at this figure, I think T0 would be the logical choice as the baseline, but you have no information on test results in this period because there was no test during COVID. But then I wonder why you choose T-2 as the baseline and not T-1. And then the last sub-question here is, if I look at these graphs, A, B, and C, the T-3 estimate is actually significant. So it would also have been significant, by the way, if T-1 would have been chosen as the baseline. So in my view, it shows that the trends are not common. Should we not be worried about this? I look forward to your answers.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and challenging questions. Let me start with why I chose this progress test. So, why I think this progress test is very interesting is actually because of this knowledge accumulation. So with one test, I totally agree with you. They study this. You can really see, okay, what happens exactly here when they do this. With a progress test, a lot of things could happen in between. We're talking about a long period, also with them maybe forgetting things, not having had courses. But my idea was really, I want to look at this knowledge accumulation because this is in the end, I think, what matters. Not only that you remember something for one test, as well, a lot of students do, it is more, what do you take with you if you later on go to the labor market? And I think especially also for medical students, it is important that they have quite a knowledge base. So not only this one test, but well, a lot of knowledge over time. And that's why I chose to really focus on this progress test.
Yeah, so I think that's fine. I just wanted to say that it actually attenuates your results. So if anything, the results are stronger if you would have looked at the new accumulation of knowledge. So I think your results would have been this is a lower bound estimate that you're testing, that you're finding.
I think it might actually depend a bit. So maybe indeed for students who are already further ahead in their study program, they have this good knowledge base already. So then maybe it could underestimate it to some extent because they already, well, were testing old knowledge that they had previously to the COVID-19 pandemic. Although here I'm also looking at first year students who did not really have this knowledge. Everything is new for them, also what's basically shown in this progress test for them. So I'm actually not sure whether it would really bias these estimates downwards there. So this is something, yeah, I would need to think more about, but I think because I really take these early stage students, that this bias might not be so strong here. So continuing to this figure 2.3, my results showing what's happening on the student test scores over time. There you're worried about this short period and a bit of whether the common trend assumption holds. And I completely understand your worries here. So of course, ideally you see nothing significant before a very long period. You can really show my results are super robust. This unfortunately did not happen here. So, well, research is not always as you wish, unfortunately. But first of all, regarding not having a lot of points before the pandemic started. So this was also a bit what I had to balance. So I really wanted to take these early stage students, also because they did not do any internships yet. Their study was not really delayed. So there was less bias in that sense. So I really want to focus on the early stage students. Then, for actually second year students, I have some more time before. I also looked at this, and then actually what you see is in the very early stage, I don't really see any significance, and then it kind of has this downward going trend. Whereas, upward going trend if we look at the scores. So now the pandemic happened, and suddenly I actually get negative significant results. So it would be great to have this longer period that makes it more robust. But I would say because I really see this trend break, so first going up and then suddenly these estimates are actually negative, that strengthens a bit that there might actually be something going on, because what you would expect is then actually the trend to continue without this pandemic, even though it is significant here. So this is how I try to interpret my results, and also looking at the descriptives, I don't really see any good significant differences between these groups.
Yeah, thank you. I think maybe one way forward could be to use synthetic controls.
So this is actually something I looked into for this. Unfortunately, I did not do this in the end because I could mainly do this based on their prior scores. And as you said, well, I only have some observations before the pandemic, so constricting on only 2 points or 3 points per individual, this synthetic control did not really work out. I also missed a lot of information on the students. So the synthetic control well, would have been biased most likely as well in my case. So that's why I didn't choose to do it in the end.
All right, thanks. Thanks a lot.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Le Routier, Professor of Applied Environmental Economics at CREST and ENSEI in Paris, France, and Professor Le Routier is present online.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot for the opportunity of reading this very interesting PhD thesis. And dear candidate, dear Henriëtte, I also want to apologize that I'm not able to be here in person today for this very important moment in your career and in your life. So I also want to congratulate you on the very clear presentation that you just made, which I think really means that not only are you able to write rigorous research, but you can also present research findings in a very synthetic way, which is very important to have impact also outside academia. Now for my questions. My first question is very much related to the previous questions that were asked. It's on chapter 2. And I want to ask you a bit about using the stacked difference in difference method for this chapter. So you also use this method for chapter 4. And in chapter 4, it's very clear why this method is working in a way, because you always observe observations that are controlled, that are like not treated before the implementation of a low emission zone. And after the implementation of the low emission zone, you also always observe cities that are not treated at the same time because they're not yet treated or never treated. While in chapter 2, it's a bit confusing to me because I don't think that you have any observations or students that remain untreated after the onset of the pandemic. And so I really want to ask you what exactly you think you are comparing. What is exactly your identification variation here? Because I think it really matters if we want to interpret your results. And this remains a little confusing to me. And my second question is on chapter 4. And I want to ask you, in chapter 4, you find heterogeneous treatment effects, where you find that the unemployed that decrease the duration of unemployment the most after the implementation of a low emission zones are the older individuals and the individuals aged 30 to 39. And for this particular group, I think I wonder if you've investigated the role of child care responsibilities in explaining those results, because we know that children are more susceptible to air pollution effects, and that a benefit of low emission zones is that they spend less time being sick and not being able to go to school. So I wonder if you have interpretations of your findings in that direction for this heterogeneity. Thank you.
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and your interesting questions. Let me start with chapter 2, so why I chose to stack difference and difference here. So I think what you're thinking about is that COVID happened at the same time for everyone. So there's not really this heterogeneity in timing when the treatment started. This is completely true, but what I try to do here is stack basically this event based on where students were in their study program. So I have students who were in the first year when the pandemic started and students who were in the second year when the pandemic started. So the relative time in terms of their study duration differs. So maybe not indeed the real timing when it started, but the relative time of where the students were in the study program, that differs. So that's why I want to stack these to really have this one starting point of the pandemic. Also, what I would be worried with is that the treatment would differ between these two groups. So maybe first-year students struggle more in the sense they cannot meet their peers, they cannot meet their professors. It's very hard then to also, if you're at home, do not know a lot, to ask your peers to help each other. So this could definitely have a huge impact on them, on their test scores then as well. Also for second-year students, what might happen is, well, they already have this basis, they know a bit, well, their peers, they can discuss things, but also whatever they have to learn is getting more and more difficult over time. So maybe because of that it's more difficult, they actually do really need this interaction with their professors. So this is why I thought, okay, there is kind of this relative difference in the timing when the pandemic started, and also it matters because I might actually expect differences between both groups. And in the end, I also look at this and I don't really find a lot of differences between these groups. So in the end, I do find that is actually, the effects were quite the same over the different cohorts. Going to your question about chapter 4, where I look at the heterogeneity in age. So how did these low emission zones, this improved air quality, affect people differently, the unemployed, by their age? And indeed, as you say, I find that older individuals, so above 50, but also individuals 30 to 39, are actually significantly impacted their unemployment duration. I would say that this actually matches also a bit the literature, so they're more skeptical to air pollution, older people, so that might match. But now what you're mainly aiming for is whether these people 30 to 39, who are most likely to have young kids, could be also affected by their kids going to school, and maybe with this improved air quality, these kids are less sick, so they go to school more, therefore they're more able to find a job. This is something I have not thought about, so what I do know is that this literature on childcare and searching for a job really says, okay, if people have their children at home, it's also more difficult to find the time to actually look for jobs, to apply to jobs, to go to all these interviews. So in general, children do have this negative impact on this job search process, also on the unemployment duration. Now, also the literature in the environmental literature shows that if the air quality improves, the health of people improves, and also of kids. So also there has been this paper, I forgot the co-authors for now, but they really look at this labor supply, and they show that mainly if there's more pollution, people stay home, supply less hours because of their kids actually becoming more sick, that they have to stay at home. So this could be a very likely channel here. So kids may be less at home because they're more healthy, enabling them to find a job and therefore reducing the unemployment duration. So I would say this could be a very interesting channel to look at. I have not looked at it. I am not sure whether we can look at this with this data, but that's something I would need to check because it's a very interesting mechanism.
Thank you for your answers.
Okay, the opposition will be continued by Professor Hanemans, Professor of Education Economics and the Chair of Human Capital, Educational Technology and Inequality at the Research Center for Education and the Labour Market at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidates, dear Henriëtte, let me first start by joining all the other opponents and congratulating you with this great thesis. I really enjoyed reading it, and I like how your dissertation combines the two types of environmental stressors impacts on both higher education and job seekers. And of course, especially the chapter that many questions have been about the effects of COVID-19 relates very much to my own research, and I really enjoyed reading a paper that was on a different type of education but still had a lot of similarities. So thank you for that. And although not related to your thesis, I would also like to take this opportunity to stress my appreciation for you as a researcher and as a person. I also have fond memories of our conferences together, and I also want to say that I really appreciate your down-to-earth attitude towards research and the life of being a researcher in general, and that's also that I think could be said more often. So thank you for that too. Having said that, of course, I'm here to ask you a question. Two actually, and they are more of the overarching type, challenging you a bit to think beyond your thesis. And the answer to the first question may actually, determine a little bit the answer to the second as well. So the first question is about your two air quality studies, where you look at job seekers, and both questions you look at job seekers. Now that's a very specific group of people, and also a quite small group. Not to say it's not relevant, but of course if we think about the workforce, it's much bigger. So I'd like to challenge you a bit to think about whether the results you found could be extrapolated to other groups and what that would mean and how they would potentially be affected. And then the second question is about what we can do with your results. So you say in your thesis a couple of times, and you also said in your presentation, like, these are very important results. They have to be taken into account when we talk about policy, and that's where it ends. And here I would like to challenge you a little bit to think out loud about, okay, but what kind of policies could or should we or the government develop to proactively do something with your results? And depending on how you answer the first question, yeah, if you can, for the chapters on air pollution, say something about what policies for the whole workforce and not just the job seekers. I'm looking forward to your answers.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your very kind words and also for your challenging questions. I really like to also think a bit about the broader concept of what I've been written here. So, yes, unemployed job seekers might be a relatively small group. Although, still, a lot of people are in unemployment. We all hope that they transition smoothly to the next jobs. So we do not want any things to hinder them. But another group that you might be thinking about that's very closely related are people who are actually employed, but also want to switch jobs. They're also searching for jobs. Maybe that's not the main thing they're doing, they still have the job next to it. But I would say that actually my results are also very likely to hold for them because, well, air quality is there. It's not that it differs between people like, hey, I have this effect on you, on the other group of people, I'm not going to have this effect. So also for them, what I do expect is that it actually affects them in a similar way, so that they might also be now willing to accept lower wages. So the other close related group might actually be affected in a similar way. So what I think is that these two chapters are really all about this transitioning in the labor market, as in either from unemployment to a job or from one job to the other, that we want to have as smooth as possible. Whether it holds, that's something to check. So maybe also what I can still do, especially also with the last paper where I'm using administrative data, see if we can identify who is searching for a job, who is switching jobs, to see whether it actually also holds for this group as well, to well, take it a bit broader.
Before you continue to the next question, may I? What about people who are not seeking a job at all? I mean, air quality probably influences all of us. Do you know something about literature? Can you speculate a little bit about how it might affect our worker performance, for example?
So yes, in general. So then I go a bit beyond my own results, but more the environmental literature focusing on these labor markets. So here it really shows that, well, not only job seekers, but also people having a job are less productive on more polluted days. So what happens is that they may take mainly more breaks during their work hours. Well, we know if we're taking longer breaks, more breaks, that actually all reduces our working time. So also for them this happens, and also this cognitive part. With air pollution, if they're actually, well, making more mistakes, making worse decisions, that all affects them in this negative way. So in general, this whole air pollution literature, especially related to these labor markets, shows that poor air quality is not great for labor markets in general, and there should be something that we should do to this. And I think now I come to your second question. So what can we do? If I take this broader view, what can we do is we really need to first, I think, be aware that this is happening. I think all these things start with awareness, because if we're not aware, we cannot act. So that's the first step. Now, recently I heard about very interesting research that actually well, made people aware about the air quality. When they were cooking, they had the sensor, and it actually showed that the air quality became worse whilst cooking. Now, they were aware, and they actually really, well, this increase in poor air quality was reduced a lot during cooking because people were simply aware. They started to, well, maybe not open windows, that depends a bit on the day whether that's good, but they really paid attention to this. They acted differently, which already reduced this poor air quality. So I think that is a relatively easy first step. Awareness, and then people already act. Also a relatively cheap step, I would say. If we look a bit beyond, what we can do is install air cleaning devices, for example, in classrooms, maybe in workplaces, that improve the air quality. And this actually is something I'm setting up at the moment in secondary schools, where we are going to look at how these air cleaning devices might actually improve this air quality and also help students to perform better on tests. So this could be a potential other thing to do. If we go another step bigger, because, well, at every level we can potentially do something. We're more at the governmental policy level. Low emission zones now in a lot of studies have been shown to really be effective in improving local air quality. So reducing all these adverse health effects, improving student test scores, and now also reducing this unemployment duration. So measurements like these that improve the local air quality might also be very helpful here.
Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Meijers, Associate Professor of Macroeconomics at Maastricht University.
Thank you. Dear Henriëtte, dear candidate, I very much also enjoyed reading your thesis, and also I also conclude on appreciating your work and your results, including its nice design that we all see here in front of us. I also very much appreciated our collaboration in the macroeconomic course that we taught together for many, many years, and where you were very experienced when I was a new coordinator of that course, and you really helped me in introducing into that course. So thank you very much for that. Of course, we are here today to ask questions about your thesis. And let me focus also on chapter 2, the effects of COVID on student performance in the progress test. By the way, the progress test, the voortgangstoets, was also in the old days the most important test that we had here at the economic faculty. In my own research on cognitive processing, we distinguished between two effects. Either subjects processed information more deeply, or took longer to answer, which are two quite distinct phenomena. Could a similar distinction also apply to your findings? So is the reduced number of questions answered as a result of a knowledge gap, perhaps maybe due to COVID crisis or other stressors? Or could it reflect slower cognitive processing, such as a reduced attention span? So you write in chapter 2 that the conclusions may graduate with a smaller knowledge base, and in chapter 5 that they answer fewer questions due to reduced confidence. But you interpret this mainly as a knowledge issue. So my question is here, could it also be a matter of time pressure or a slower formulation of answers, so a slower cognitive processing of the students? I look forward to your response.
Esteemed opponent, so also thank you for your kind words and your interesting questions. So this is actually something I have not thought about, so I'm just going to speculate here. So my first thought when I saw the results was really, okay, this knowledge, because we really see the test scores going down. We see that individuals actually make less mistakes if they answer. And I also see that they answer less questions. Now, what you're thinking about is that, well, maybe they answer less questions not necessarily because they do not know. It could be because actually they just needed more time during COVID to be concentrated. I would say that COVID indeed impacted also, or is likely to have impacted our thinking. So it might have been that a lot of students experienced some stress, that they had more troubles concentrating. Although I would say that, because I look at a very large number of students, that on average, this might not be the case that all students were more stressed and therefore less concentrated. Yes, there is time pressure for this test, and there are 200 multiple choice questions, so that's a lot to answer. So I should definitely test to be sure, but I would say that on average, because of these large numbers, that this is not likely to drive the results. That's why I went to this knowledge gap. However, what might be something, and that is actually something I looked in very recently, is that it might not only be driven by them not knowing, but it could be partially driven by them being more risk averse during the pandemic. So I looked into the literature, and actually they're not really sure. So they're a bit inconclusive what happened during COVID in terms of risk aversion. Some articles say, well, more risk aversion. Some say actually less risk averse. And also when I try to calculate how risk averse they should be, I get to a very high parameter. So that's why I said, well, not risk aversion, but knowledge gap, but this slower processing, this concentration is something I did not look at. And I think it's also very hard to analyze, as I do not have time or data on the exact time they took to make this test.
That would be my second question indeed. How would you design then the Vortragingstoets or your data to give an answer on that, I think, important question?
Yeah, so for this, I would really need data, information on the time they took to take this test. So if this time, for example, increased, then it could indeed be that they needed longer time. But still, then it could be because of concentration. It could also be because they just struggled more with the questions because of their knowledge. That also increases their duration of how long they would take this test. But then I would, especially if I have this time, really have to look at the individuals that, well, set the whole exam until they had to finish. That would then be most interesting to see what happened there.
Thank you.
I think there's still time for one more question in the second round, and for that we go back to Professor Stefan.
Yes, okay. So thanks a lot. I was a little bit surprised because I thought there were others who haven't asked yet. But okay, then a short question. Your study on the effects of fine particulate matter pollution. This uses a randomized allocation of interview dates. And you find that the reservation wages decrease with air pollution. What does this imply for our trust in surveys on labor market outcomes? Do you think in the future we should also always control for air pollution during the survey date when we analyze labor market outcomes?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for this question. So in our case, these interviews were all taken in one location, and it was really this fixed script that they basically read out. So not a lot of room is there to deviate. Also, they were in one fixed location, not all the way across the country. So this also definitely then limits this bias, whether we should take this into account. However, there is also a very interesting paper, not on air quality, but on temperature, that actually shows that interviewers might be affected by temperature. So it could also be air quality in that sense. So it's something we should take into account. Also, especially that I see that not only some answers, but a lot of different answers of individuals are affected by air quality.
Now, I must say, you may finish your sentence, or did you already?
I somehow finished, so maybe to stress it one more time. So a lot of different answers are affected by air quality. So maybe also with the respondents, yes, it seems like not only on the reservation wage or the preferences, but more things are affected in terms of how they respond to questions. So it might be worth it to think about whether we should take this into account.
Okay, that was a long sentence, but that's okay. Henriëtte Bogaard, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Southside, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Hit the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. Better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. Southside, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Henriëtte Bogaard, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Domen is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. Thereafter, Dr. Koen will give the laudatio. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Henriëtte, do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Maria Henriëtte Bogaard, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. The degree of doctor, as evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary and the other members of the committee and affixed with the official seal of the university.
Dear Henriëtte, dear family and friends, as you can see, I think, from my face, I'm very happy, and in particular, I'm very proud, also after today, that you successfully defended your thesis. But at the same time, I have to say I also feel a bit sad, Henriëtte, because it somehow marks the end of a longer journey which I really enjoyed, I have to say. We are now working together since 8 years, it's a long time, in which I was able to supervise you in different stages of your academic career. I would like to look back a little bit and share some anecdotes and some highlights. Now you're laughing, but let's wait. Let me start in September 2015, which was when Henriëtte started her Bachelor Economics and Business Economics in Maastricht, and I, at the same time actually, also joined UM as an assistant professor. Well, at this time we didn't know each other, but I can admit that I already thought about you without both of us knowing it, and I just figured it out a couple of years later. Why is that, you may ask? Well, this is because at this time, I think many of you remember, including Henriëtte, for sure I know, that the highway, this A2 on the other side, which is now underground, at this time it wasn't underground, and went right through Maastricht with residential buildings actually literally next to that highway. So every time that I was stuck in a traffic jam, which happened quite often, I was thinking, what type of people live here in these buildings right next to that busy highway? Well, I did not know that I will meet one of those residents very soon, and that this resident will also write a PhD thesis about the adverse effects of air pollution. Well, it was on September 27, 2017, I looked it up for this laudation, when I received an email by a bachelor student called Henriëtte Bogaard, misspelling my surname, I also noticed now that I looked it up, and asking for supervision of her marble thesis. My colleague Eric Direct, I think I saw Eric also here, linked you to me. Thanks again, Eric, for doing that. The thesis topic sounded very interesting, and I invited you for a meeting, and we shortly discussed your ideas, and I agreed that, or we agreed that you should use a subdata to analyze it, which is, for those of you who don't know it, a quite complex panel data set on Germany. Well, after that meeting, Henriëtte disappeared for a couple of weeks, and I started feeling a bit guilty because I thought maybe it was too much to ask from a bachelor student. But then, out of a sudden, Henriëtte came back presenting first results. And well, this was super impressive that she, as a bachelor student back then, independently prepared these data and even ran first regressions. So that was the moment that I knew that I want to have Henriëtte as a PhD student. And I'm pretty sure that you, Henriëtte, did not know back then this. And I mean that you want to do a PhD and that you want to do it with me. So I was super happy that Henriëtte decided to stay in Maastricht and to enroll into our research master program. And we started collaborating more closely, and Henriëtte worked as a research assistant with me and then also wrote her master thesis. And I was even more happy that you accepted our offer to continue working with me and doing your PhD in Maastricht, and here we are today. Henriëtte, it has always been a pleasure working with you simply because you're the person you are. You are smart, you are committed, you are goal-oriented, with a slight tendency to make sometimes problems a bit bigger than they actually are. You are coachable to a certain degree, and you always kept a healthy work-life balance. You give direct feedback. I have to admit that I had to get used to that. You are always willing to help, and you're working very independently. But most importantly, and I think that makes it so nice working with you, is that you have very strong social skills, and I think the large number of people in the audience today is evident. Well, during our time working together, at some point, we decided to switch from English to Dutch. And let me do so also now, and finishing this laudation in your mother tongue. Henriëtte, ik wens je het allerbeste voor je toekomst en ik hoop echt dat je in de academische wereld blijft. Het is niet altijd gemakkelijk in zeer competitieve en kritische omgeving. Maar de wetenschap heeft mensen zoals jij nodig. Ik zal je carrière blijven volgen en dat is geen dreigement, maar gewoon omdat ik erg trots op je ben en benieuwd hoe het verder met je gaat. Thomas en ik hebben uiteraard ook een cadeautje voor je. Tijdens een van de PhD-dinners bij ons thuis bleek dat je graag een schaap zou willen hebben. Geen schaap, Koen. Het liefst hadden we inderdaad een schaap gekocht, maar we wilden iets geven dat alles combineert waarvan je houdt. Koen uiteraard, de natuur, kamperen en dieren. En hier vooral schapen naast jullie hondje. De keuze was te snel gemaakt. En misschien kun je al een beetje raden wat het is. Anders zie je het straks. Het zit hierin. Nog eens gefeliciteerd, Henriëtte. Ook aan jouw familie. En ook namens Thomas. Heel goed gedaan, heel erg goed gedaan. Dank je wel.
Dear Maria, it's good to see that the air pollution at the A2 has never affected your academic performance. Dear Dr. Bogaard, also on behalf of the School of Business and Economics and of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree that you have acquired, and herewith I close the session. We stay in this room for a photo moment, so if you want, you can take pictures. For all people, there is a reception at the Refter. The beadle will direct you to that room. I would like to ask Dr. Le Routier to stay on screen so that you can take part of the photo, and thank you for being present here today online.